P1. Nice job. 1 and 2 for Ferrari. Awesome job. Well managed.
Grazie ragazzi, grande gara. Forza Ferrari sempre. Grazie mille. Un saluto a Maranello, grazie per i pezzi. Grazie. Che performance qui in Singapore. Grazie. Grazie mille. La macchina è stato grande. Quasi come voi. Grazie. Thank you guys, all of you.
Seb, contentissimo per te. Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Enjoy the fireworks. Here is awesome, as usual. You are the lion of Singapore. How many wins did you have? Many?
Five.
Like the car number 5.
Exactly. Grazie.
Well done.
Welcome to American Racing Snobs. Tony Rizzuti, Eric Morris.
You just had to drink that in, didn't you?
5 for number 5, the Lion of Singapore. The world is right again. It feels so good. Sebastian back on top.
Ferrari 1-2. They finally pulled it off. It's been how long, Tony? Was it Hungary 2017?
Man.
Was the last time Ferrari went 1-2. It's their first hat trick of victory since 2008, the Kimi Räikkönen Felipe Massa days.
Chills, man. The hairs are sticking up on my arms, Eric.
This is good for Formula One, isn't it?
It's great for Formula One.
You know what my favorite part of the race weekend was? Because I'm not a Ferrari fan.
Right.
My favorite part of the race weekend was you could take the form book and throw it out the damn window. Because we sat here talking about how this was going to be Lewis versus Max.
Yeah.
And somehow the boys from Maranello piled downforce onto that car. This should have been one of their weakest tracks of the year.
Yeah.
And that Ferrari was transformed. Credit to Maranello. The boys in the shop and the girls did amazing work to put a car that was capable of going 1-2 at Singapore underneath Seb Vettel and Chucky Leclerc.
Nobody expected this. Just unbelievable. And Eric, you called it. We had the wrong guys, you're right, but you called it. It was going to be qualifying. Whoever could get up front, they were going to be able to control the pace early on so you could race it at the end, and that is exactly what Charles Leclerc did. Unfortunately for him, two ways to look at it, and we're going to dive into this in a little bit. Either Ferrari screwed him on the strategy, or Vettel just had an amazing run on those hard tires. We'll break that down later, but it was qualifying that helped set this race, just like you called it.
Leclerc put in a masterful lap. And it was down to him and Hamilton.
And it wasn't a perfect lap. He screwed up 3 times.
And he barely beat Hamilton, but he was on the ragged edge. Vettel was nowhere. He had a great first run, but his second lap, he had to
abort it.
He had to abort because it was such a disaster for him. He was yellow in Sector 1, yellow Sector 2. Leclerc gets pole position, impressive drive. I thought that was phenomenal from Charles Leclerc.
Yes.
I'm looking for a Hamilton-Leclerc fight to the finish. Seb, by qualifying third, accidentally put himself in position to win this race. I think that, I do think Ferrari screwed Leclerc. I think Vettel did a great job, but he was also extremely lucky that the race unfolded the way it did to put him in position. He's certainly deserving of winning a race this year. He very easily could have won Canada. And with all the things that have been said, this has to be a huge relief. And I think he said it was an affirmation.
Yeah.
Less relief than it was, hey, this is how things are supposed to be. I can still do this. But I think he was extremely fortunate because almost everybody got the strategy a little bit wrong. And you know what I think caused that? We mentioned that Leclerc could control the pace, and they were really babying those tires.
Really slow.
The main reason is that this pit lane at Singapore, because it's so narrow, it's a city track, it's got, I think, 40 mile per hour pit road speed limit, slower than usual. And it is a long pit delta. You've got I think you lose 30 plus seconds pitting at this track, whereas at others it's more like 22 to 25 seconds. So that factors into your strategy. A 2-stopper adds not only the pit stop time, but the extra 7 to 10 seconds that it takes to come down pit lane means you're hell-bent to try to get there on a 1-stopper, even if the tires don't want to be 1-stop. The strategy is kind of dictated by that pit lane delta. So everyone's babying their tires, and because of that, there's no gap. What we're so used to in this turbo hybrid era is that Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull run away, and the midfield scrap is usually a pit stop behind the race leaders, and that opens up a lot of clean racetrack. Even at places where you can pass, like Monza or Spa, you'll see that gap open up, and once people are in their pit window, they start to look for a place to come out in traffic. In Singapore, where it matters the most to have clean racetrack, there wasn't any. And that really threw a wrench into everyone's strategy because they were afraid to pit because who are you going to come out behind?
Right.
It's going to ruin your race if you're stuck behind a racing point that's running super long into the race because they started on a different tire. So it really threw a wrench into the strategy.
Yeah, it was, and so many things went right for Ferrari, right? They were able to get Vettel past Hamilton so they could sit 1-2 and really control that pace. Look, everybody, all the good cars, as you explained, they're on soft tires. The soft tires are not going to last very long. And the hards, if you go out hard or fast and then switch to the hards, they can't make it to the end either. So you kind of have to baby the softs. So everybody was babying the softs, but by having the two Ferraris, then the Mercedes and Verstappen in there as well, they were able to kind of control that pace. I think at one time even Lewis was like, this is ridiculous.
We're crawling, but you can't pass there.
You can't. So they were able to control it. They had the gaps where they needed, and then when it was time to go, there was time to go. We'll talk about the strategy here in a second as to whether did Ferrari were they geniuses? Were they screwing Leclerc, or did they just F it up and it happened to work in their favor? We'll talk about that in a second because Nico Rosberg, I have sound from him as to what his thought was, which really kind of changed my opinion. But other factors really played out for Ferrari because when the strategy changed and Mercedes had to go long, their hope was they were going to have fresher tires at the end when everybody was charging. Safety car. And Ferrari was building up a gap. They were pushing at that point in time, build up a safety car gap in case we get one. We have never not had a safety car at Singapore, but we're deep in the race and there's none, and we get three.
We ended up with three
I mean, it worked out perfect for Ferrari to keep that gap, cool off those tires just enough to be able to get another good run on them. And then I thought Sebastian Vettel at the end of the race, the way he timed and how he varied when to go was incredible. The last one, when he just frickin' took off about 3 corners early when he'd been going 1.5 corners early, was genius because he caught Charles sleeping, and he was gone.
I think it was going to take a superhuman effort to get Leclerc by Vettel. Apparently it was discussed in Maranello to switch Charles or not to switch Charles. It was on the pit wall and in the team headquarters. They were talking about, we accidentally messed up this strategy and it cost Leclerc victory because he was driving close to a perfect weekend. It should have been his race, and I don't think anybody expected the undercut to go the way it did. I think they were risking Vettel because he was, in third place, fourth place before the pit stops, and he was able to jump up, I think, from third to first over Hamilton, over Leclerc, and I don't think that was their intention. He just put in a fantastic outlap, and nobody expected that this overcut would be so detrimental, and by that point, Mercedes had to react immediately, and they didn't. They were probably just trying to cover Leclerc, not thinking that Vettel was going to be a threat to win. And by the time Mercedes realized that they had missed the optimum window, they were screwed. They just had to stay out and soak in their own juices. They were hoping if they got a virtual safety car, then it would have worked out perfectly for Hamilton. But that was a long shot, though this is the track where you expect a safety car. If it had happened in that, 7 to 8 lap stretch from when Vettel had pitted and they left Hamilton out after Leclerc's pit stop, put Hamilton into the lead. He was leading laps for, the 142nd time in his career.
Incredible.
That's a Formula One record. I think he broke the tie with he tied Michael Schumacher for the most Grand Prix ever led. Mercedes was banking on a safety car to come out when they were out there, almost kind of like a NASCAR strategy, try to catch the caution by going long. that's the only thing that could have saved the Mercedes strategy. But you don't see this often where Mercedes has a car that can win, and then they get the strategy wrong. And not only did it cost him second, it kicked him off the podium.
Yeah, it's interesting because nobody got the strategy right, but it worked out great for Ferrari. You were talking about those windows. It's the part where watching it or being in the stands you don't understand, but there's so much data that comes into these race teams, and they've got 4 or 5 guys on the box, just super smart people that understand the mathematics around the gaps, the timing of the gaps, and how long it takes and all that. The optimum window opened up perfectly for Charles Leclerc, and Ferrari didn't pit him.
I think that threw Mercedes off.
They did pit Vettel, but like you said, he's back in the pack. Verstappen saw the gap, and Red Bull's like, we got to come now. This is the gap. But Leclerc didn't, and I think that caught Mercedes on their back foot because I think it was so obvious. And Nico Rosberg mentioned this in his podcast. When you look at the data, because he's seen it, the gap is so obvious that this is when you pit. If you looked in the encyclopedia as to when to pit at Singapore, what Charles Leclerc had was the dream scenario, and they didn't pit him. And I think it caught Mercedes so off guard as to why didn't they come that they decided to go long, and their day was stuck. They were stuck. And it worked out for Sebastian Vettel only because of the outlap he put on. Here's what Nico Rosberg had to say about that.
Yes, the strategy wasn't his advantage, but still, that outlap that he did on those hard tires was surely one of the best laps he's ever done, because it was absolutely epic. The computer calculations only said that you should be able to gain about 2 seconds, and he gained 3.4 seconds on Charles. So surely Charles didn't do a very good outlap either, in-lap, sorry. And Sebastian just did the absolute most epic outlap the world has ever seen. So, if you do the job there in those crucial moments, then you somewhat deserve, of course, the race win. So great job there, hats off, and really important comeback for Sebastian, important for his mental game as well, and for support within the team. So congrats there, well deserved.
See, I thought Vettel was lucky. I wasn't going to say he backed into that win, but I thought he got extremely lucky. Now I think he was lucky and good, because I hadn't seen that data. I didn't realize what a drive
None
Seb
of us
had.
did.
Yeah, it was kind of the sneaky factor in that race was how did Seb get there? You thought it was all strategy. To me, it's great that Seb is on form and was able to pull that off. It's good for the sport. It's especially good for a Ferrari fan like you. But where did that car come from? That's what I don't understand. This shouldn't have happened.
No.
Now, the strategy, the execution, how they managed to snooker Mercedes out of a podium and get a 1-2, I don't think anyone's fully going to understand that complete picture. But what is mystifying to me is where did this car come from and what kind of Ferrari is going to show up this weekend in Sochi?
Yeah.
Do we have a fight?
Well, I think it's too late for the championship, but this is what we kind of expected at the beginning of the year. But not at Singapore. Like even with the preseason testing that we had back at Barcelona, we knew they were going to be fast in a straight, and we thought they'd be good on some of the medium tracks and definitely on the long-haul tracks where you need the power. But I don't even think then anybody thought about them for Singapore. I mean, everything went their way.
It's about time.
Overreact.
It's about time.
Absolutely. And with Sebastian, what he did in qualifying made me think like, oh, here we go again. He can't do it when he needs to. This was huge for Ferrari. It was huge for the team. It was huge for the engineers to know they're going the right direction, and maybe they found something. We'll find out here at Sochi. But for Sebastian Vettel was crying on the podium. This isn't a first-time winner. He has. This could be what it takes to kind of build up his confidence again, and I'm happy for that because I told you last week listening back to the podcast, I was sad at myself. I was mad at myself for burying my guy. I don't think what I said was wrong, but it felt bad piling on him, and this just felt so good to me. And I think you could see it afterwards when they had to do the individual interviews. Even Lewis came up and gave him a hug and had that like a genuine smile, like, I'm happy for you. That was big, and they're better friends than people think.
Yeah, and Lewis gets a lot of bad publicity because he's so flashy, but he is a genuinely nice human being. He really does care about his competitors. He is truly happy when some of his rivals succeed, and I think it's just another example of the class. I don't think that there's an act being put on by Lewis Hamilton. He doesn't strike me as the type to, really dig at someone behind the scenes, kind of like that. Despite his rivalry with Nico Rosberg, it seems like they've buried the hatchet, and I think there's a lot of things to appreciate about someone like Lewis Hamilton, who has accomplished what he has, but still has that humanity on display when he, sees what Sebastian's gone through. He knows that could very easily be me in a year or two, because the sport success can be so fleeting. What was it Sebastian said in his cool-down lap at Brazil in 2013? Remember the good times. Remember the good times. They may not always be here.
Yeah, and I don't think Lewis gives him the big hug if he does it again at Sochi.
No.
Right? This
Nope.
was... You've
that
had
was a demon being exercised.
You've
right
had
there.
a tough run. I'm proud of you. Got it back. We mentioned Charles Leclerc, who did everything perfect, but his team let him down on the strategy. Here was what it sounded like in his car at the end of the race.
Slow button on, B2.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. We speak later.
Copy, understood.
So,
yeah.
I understand why he was frustrated. He did say after he looked at the data and Ferrari explained what they were trying to do and how it actually played out, he was a lot more understanding of the situation, because I'm not going to say he was inconsolable, but he was definitely miffed. Because you think about it, he could have won his fourth or fifth race this season. He's only got 2. It could have been 3 in a row. No one's won their first 3 races in succession since, I believe, Mika Hakkinen in the late 90s for McLaren. I think Damon Hill did it as well in the 90s for Williams. But that's still an amazing record. He drove well enough to win that race, and he wanted to understand why. And that understanding is not going to come when you're on the podium or on the cool-down lap, when you're on display for the entire world. I do think that it was a mistake. I don't think they screwed him on purpose. I think that Charles is still making a case to be the number 1 driver at Ferrari going forward. He didn't do anything to hurt his case. I thought he said all the right things.
I agree. Yeah, he was vocal on the radio during the race, right?
And he should have been.
He wanted extra power. He wanted a chance to.
And he got it. He got the engine mode, which kind of surprised me. I thought they were going to hold once they decided not to wave him through. I'm surprised they gave him a weapon to fight with, because them fighting each other could have ended in tears and a pile of carbon fiber.
But they reminded him, hey, let's not do anything crazy here. And he's like, I'm good. I'm not gonna. Just give me what I want.
Yeah.
And they did. So I thought, look, as a driver, you have to publicly come out and defend yourself a little so the team knows they can't really walk on you. But at the same time, you can't trash your teammate and your team. That just causes a lot of friction. But remember something. When he won at Monza, in Italian, they didn't say to him, congratulations. They said, you are forgiven, based off of what happened in qualifying, because the team was really miffed at what happened in qualifying, that he kind of left Seb out. Now,
well, everyone got left out in that.
I agree
think
with you
Leclerc
with that.
was correct in doing whatever he did, regardless of the plan, because nothing was going to plan in Monza qualifying. Everyone had to finally just fend for themselves, because whatever plan you made, it was out the window.
Yep, but I feel like everybody, they wanted to make sure everything was cool. So I think it happened as good as it can happen as far as a team goes with the orders. It worked out. They've certainly talked about it. He was excited for Seb afterwards when he thought about it. He was there. He celebrated with the team. So far, Charles Leclerc, from the outside looking in, appears to be the perfect teammate. Speaking of perfect teammates, your teammate got the usual, Valtteri, this is James, which is never a good sign. In fact, let's listen to that right now.
Race situation.
So race situation, Lewis is still out. He will drop behind Verstappen, in between Verstappen and yourself. So you're going to the end. This is the hard and no front change. So target 47.9.
Valtteri exchange. Can you do 48.8, please? We gave you the first stop.
Uh-oh.
Well, we'll see. This isn't to go long, I guess, or...
Yeah, 8th and Valtteri, I just need to make sure we can get these tyres far and work as a team. I'll compare it back to you.
Copy. When is he stopping?
2 laps, 3 laps.
So you are only half a second unsafe to Lewis. So control the window.
This is the interesting part here, Eric.
And target 49.5.
The targets keep changing.
Yeah, getting
with
bigger.
that lap time, Albon is going to overtake me.
FM, try just to push him back.
You can hear the nervousness here at the end, too.
So Albon 0.7. Albon 0.7. You will have DRS. And we need to drop that gap a bit more. 1 second.
Go faster, but go slower.
What you can in these corners. So still 1 second safe. We want to do 2 seconds. Everything you can do in sector 3. And we need a bit more.
Yeah, relax.
And look out for Lewis on pit exit.
You're welcome.
Right there.
Thank you, Valtteri. Let's win this race together now.
How about that? He gave him the...
That's great teamwork, and
Yep.
Bottas knows it. He knows they owe him one because Hamilton should have been in front of Bottas. He was second. He should have been in front of Vettel and Verstappen. Mercedes know they really stepped in it with the strategy, and they had the ability to salvage Lewis's points to a certain extent. The problem is, if Bottas goes by, he brings Albon through. So
Yep.
I don't think this was about... there's a certain extent of Lewis deserved to be in front of Valtteri on merit. I don't think it was 100% them trying to make that right. I think they were worried that they were going to lose another spot to Albon. If it was just going to be Bottas on his own leaping over Hamilton, I don't think that they would have slowed him down that much. It would have been, we're awfully sorry, Lewis. I know you're fighting Valtteri for the Drivers' Championship, but this is a team championship. That was them protecting Lewis against Albon, not necessarily Bottas, and they had a tool to do that with. But that's how badly Mercedes got their call wrong. They were just praying for that safety car or a VSC to come out and save Lewis's race because they knew that was their only hope of salvaging a fight with Ferrari.
I know that's a longer clip than we usually play, almost 2 minutes.
It's fascinating.
It was fascinating in that it was originally a 47, then it was a 49, then slow down some more. Oh, by the way, the guy behind you is within DRS and has it activated, but continue to slow down. And then they got really nervous, and they're like, hey, like, you need to really slow down. And I love Bottas is just like, relax.
You're welcome.
Relax. I'm not going to, I get it. We'll be fine. And then when he finally lets him by, you're welcome. But Bottas has to wake up at night hearing, Valtteri, this is James. Whenever you hear that, it's never like, congratulations. It's slow the F down. I feel for him on that. And again, Mercedes, I think, works the teammate thing as well as anybody. And when he re-signed this year, when it looked like, oh, he's not going to be there, it's going to be Ocon, you know that was part of the deal. And I give Bottas credit. You have to be incredibly disciplined and incredibly humble to do that.
He took
because
one on the chin.
He does it more than Lewis has to do it. Let's put it that way.
Because Lewis puts himself in a position to be fighting for the win more often than Valtteri does. Not to say that Valtteri can't fight for wins. I'm not sure that he's going to be able to fight for championships, but this is why you hire Valtteri Bottas.
Yep.
He's quick, but he doesn't create drama. Nico Rosberg would have torpedoed Hamilton there, and it would have cost Mercedes points in the constructors because they would have been passed by Albon. That's the difference between having Valtteri Bottas as a known quantity and not knowing how someone like Esteban Ocon is going to react in that situation. I think it was a good display of seeing the big picture and recovering from the mistake that cost Lewis Hamilton's second spot. that very well could have been a sixth-place finish, which would have been, through no fault of his own, not a disaster, but it would have taken a frustrating situation and made it even worse. So at least they were able to mitigate that damage.
I thought it was good to play both guys because both Leclerc and Bottas had to kind of take it on the chin a little bit because of team strategy. And while they both handled it differently, they handled it the same. And I thought it was interesting to see how that worked out. But again, tremendous outdrive, tremendous effort by Sebastian Vettel. I think Ferrari got the strategy wrong, but in the end got it right. Everything worked in their favor with the safety cars. A really good race for a track in which up front you can't pass. I thought this was an interesting race, especially in the back. Before we get to the midfield and some of the other things that happened, let's talk about Max Verstappen because he had a good run. He was happy at the end. He was proud to be on the podium. He said the tires were done. He felt like that was one of the better drives he had. A good job by Red Bull as well. Albon right where he's probably supposed to be. I don't know that they can really complain. I don't think they saw Ferrari being up front, but once they were, I thought Max did a good job to keep the silver arrows behind him.
Yeah, they were able to jump over Lewis because of that. They were quicker to react to the pit stop undercut that Vettel had established.
Vettel.
Yeah, I think Red Bull managed this race better than anyone on purpose. I think that they had a good strategy for Max. I don't think that Ferrari really did everything that they did knowing that it was going to lead to what it led to. They got it right, credit to them, but I do think that Red Bull was on top of it. Albon drove a good race.
Yeah,
he was clean, finishing where he should be.
Because they were worried about him during practice because
he'd never been there.
He stuffed it in the wall, and Christian Horner's like, we don't have many more wings like that.
He had never driven at this track, which is insane. I mean, they get a lot of simulator time, but you forget the pressure that is on a rookie who is in a car that is capable of winning races. That doesn't happen in Formula One very often.
Let's talk about a couple of other things. Let's go to the back of the field. Your wife's favorite driver, Danny Ricardo, has his time thrown out, so he has to start at the back, and the Honey Badger, at least early on, was taking no prisoners. He was aggressive early on.
It fired up.
It ended up biting him at one point in time, but he was coming.
This is the worst track, besides maybe Monaco, to have this happen to you. I felt terrible. It was an MG UK spike in qualifying that got him thrown out. Nothing that the driver did on purpose. And they said it gained like 0.0001 tenths of a second, like negligible. But rules is rules, and they excluded him. It was, you knew his weekend was ruined, but at least he tried to put on a show for us. He finished out of the points, but I've never seen someone go through the field so aggressively at this racetrack. So you knew there was, at times, a smile a mile wide under that helmet.
Yeah, he was having fun.
He was on the radio, bragging, having fun.
Let's go, boys. Yeah, he was doing it.
Loved it.
He was doing good until he got around guys that just aren't going to give him that room, and then they started to have contact and punctures and everything else.
What did Graham Rahal once say? Sometimes if you run with the squirrels, you get your nuts cracked.
Yeah, that's eventually what happened. You just can't keep that up. We talked about that with somebody.
It was Leclerc in Monaco.
Yeah, like at some point in time, you're eventually going to hit them because those tracks you can't do that. You can get away with it for a while, but then it didn't happen. Another fantastic run for the McLaren team. Problems for Carlos Sainz, but Lando Norris, another true rookie, youngest guy in the field, goes out there and does what he needs to do, a 7th place finish. This kid is so impressive. So impressive.
You know, if it weren't for his extremely bad luck in the final lap at Belgium, he'd have a point streak of 4 races. Yeah. He's putting together a really impressive season, even though he's down, I think it's 13th in points. He's got 31 points this year, but it could be so much more. But he is right there in terms of pace. His racecraft is coming along nicely, too.
He looked really good. And we questioned Pierre Gastly. When he got sent back down, what would this do for the guy? Would this break his confidence, or would it make him relax a little bit going back to the other team and just going out there and driving? Well, Pierre Gastly lately, since he's returned to Toro Rosso, looks like a different driver. He looks like the driver they wanted to call up. Here's what he said on the radio at the end of the race.
P8, what a man, what a race. Very, very good job, Pierre. Very good job. You've done a very, very good job today. Fail 84, fail. Fail 84, fail.
Yes! Yes! That's what I like. Thanks for the car. Thanks for everybody. To push the car to the maximum was great. Really enjoyed the race. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's been a long day, and you've done all the hard work out there as well. You've done very good. Okay, so in front of you are Norris, Albon. Vettel won the race. Leclerc P2, Verstappen P3.
That sounds like a different Pierre Gastly. That's a happy person that's probably in the right spot for his mental being and for him to get the most out of the race car.
I think he just saved his career at Red Bull. He is clearly quicker than Danny Kvyat right now. At one point in qualifying, I think he was 4 or 5 tenths up, and not just on a single lap, pretty consistently. He's doing what he needs to do. I think when we were at Siebkins with David Hobbs, Hobbs said he has to go mop the floor with Kvyat. And I'm not saying that Kvyat's doing a bad job.
He's been really good the last few races, too.
I think Gastly is elevated. He's in a car that is more comfortable for him, and while there's still pressure, it's definitely not the laser pressure cooker, laser-focused, with the whole world looking at you in a car at Red Bull trying to be Max Verstappen's teammate. Verstappen's the new Alonso. Nobody wants to be his teammate because he's just so quick. And I don't think he's ruthless to the point that Alonso had been in points in his career, but I wouldn't want to be Verstappen's teammate. Ricardo didn't want to be Verstappen's teammate. Good recovery so far after the break with the change of scenery for Pierre Gastly.
I feel good for him, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to see this sport chew people up and spit them out. This was a good weekend for redemption with Gastly looking good, Vettel back on the top step of the podium.
And as much as we talk about how impressive Albon is, and I think he's done a nice job in that, he's not embarrassed Pierre Gastly from a standpoint of speed. Now, Albon's yet to really wad one up when he shouldn't, but the point being is Albon looks really good but young, right? He's still doing something. Now, what Albon has done that Gastly hasn't is maybe put that car into some aggressive situations and come out on the other side. Obviously, Gastly hasn't really shown that with the Toro Rosso yet, but so far it feels like it's hard to say win-win when you get knocked down a notch, but it at least feels as close to a win-win in this situation as you could get, not only for Red Bull as a brand and two teams, but for the drivers as well.
I want to talk about Alfa Romeo. I know you're a big Ferrari fan. I think one of my favorite, if not my favorite type of car in the world for a street car is Alfa Romeo. I love everything about that car company. I love how they're a poor man's Ferrari, how they have that wonderful Italian styling without the stigma that comes with the Tifosi and the Ferrari brand and all that stuff. It's, even though the cars have been notoriously unreliable in terms of road cars over the year, they have a certain charm. Petrol heads love Alfas. I got to see an Alfa Romeo lead a Formula One Grand Prix this weekend. It was awesome.
That was cool.
Antonio Giovinazzi going long. It's the first laps that Alfa Romeo had led in F1 since Spa 1983 with Andrea De Cesaris, who, by the way, was one of the finest Grand Prix drivers to never win a race. It was awesome to see the boys from Milan up front in a Grand Prix.
Well, let's talk about Antonio a little bit because he's been right there the last few weekends scoring points.
Points in 2 straight races.
This was a driver that we wondered, George Russell looks pretty good in a bad car, and Lando's really impressive, and Charles
and Nico Hülkenberg's available next year.
It feels kind of weird, and then suddenly and we even we joked that if Vettel gets points on his license, that's their guy, that's their reserve driver, and we're like, yeek. I don't know. Maybe some guys can make the transition from one type of car to another a lot quicker than others, and then other ones it just kind of takes a while. It feels kind of like maybe Giovinazzi's coming around a little bit.
He still has a little bit of work to do to prove he belongs, but this is a nice start. 9th in Monza, 10th at Singapore. It's only his 3rd points finish of his career. I think he was 10th in Austria.
All in the last half of the season, though.
Improvement.
Yes.
That's what you're looking for in a driver like that, especially when you're weighing the benefits of a Nico Hülkenberg who could be available.
What do we do with him? What does Nico do? There's only a couple of seats that could even potentially be open. I'm still baffled I'm still baffled by the Haas situation. Just baffled by it. Why you would rather have Grosjean and Magnussen
It's
than
a lateral
Nico
move,
Hülkenberg.
Tony. I don't think that Hülkenberg's a huge upgrade over Grosjean.
I think
in terms
Hülkenberg
of speed.
was going to cost a lot more.
I think that's a big part of it too. But I see it as a lateral move. So why don't you go with the known quantity, someone who's been with the team since day one, someone who has proven his worth as a developer of the car. He was the guy who said the emperor's naked when it came to their updates, and I think that saved his career at Haas for Romain Grosjean.
By the way, did you see the tweet from Rich Energy? Not that they're the greatest people
Morons.
in the world. Basically
Morons.
saying good luck with your sale to the Saudi Arabians. Basically saying that Haas is trying to get out and that they're almost like, well, we got out before you did. That was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what do you
talk about? Sour grapes.
Yeah, they're butthurt.
Yeah, they are.
They were a fraud from the beginning. I can't wait for them to go away.
Does Hülkenberg find a seat? I don't know that he does, unless he's going back to Williams.
Yeah, I think that's the only option, but I think Williams goes with Latifi. If I'm Claire, I'm picking Latifi because he's an exciting young driver, but there is value in Hülkenberg because he's got experience. He is someone who isn't going to throw the car into a heap of carbon fiber. And I'd really like to see where Russell matches up against someone like that because as much as I love Robert Kubica and his comeback, he hasn't been able to keep up with George Russell. I want to see that measuring stick of where does he kind of land. I put him on par with Lando Norris based on what I saw in Formula 2 last year from George Russell, but I think his options they're starting to run out. I thought he was a candidate to possibly go to Red Bull if they don't like what they see from Albon, but Horner said it's pretty much down to Albon versus Gasly for next year. That leaves the Haas situation. We know how that played out. It sounds like Alfa Romeo is leaning towards keeping Giovinazzi, and that really just leaves the Williams. So does he want to drive that car? I know he's in talks with them, but if his demands for money are that high, I can't imagine that they'd want to spend that much money on a driver if they need so much help with the car and someone like Latifi's available. That pretty much means he could go look at World Endurance Championship, Formula E. I know Kubica said he's looking at going to DTM, the German touring car series.
It'd be interesting if Hülkenberg's out for next year, where all the accolades, and I know it was only a few people that had it, but the accolades of this guy can be your next world champion to suddenly I can't find a ride, that's an interesting dichotomy of where his career went. Now, give him credit. He's been around a while, and a lot of guys don't. We've talked about the list of people that never got a fair shot.
He's never had a car that was capable of winning. He's had a car that was capable of podiums, and he has never achieved one. You know, he was Sergio Perez's teammate at Force India for years, and Perez got 4 podiums in that time. And a lot of them were fortuitous, but you got to think that pendulum's going to swing to Nico at some point. He was a driver with a lot of promise, but he is not setting the midfield on fire like he needs to if he was going to get a car that was capable of winning races. He was in the Ferrari mix in the rumor mill a couple years ago, but he's not the first driver to be overlooked by the Scuderia. It's obvious he has the speed, the talent, the racecraft to be in Formula One, but Formula One's not always fair. Ask Esteban Ocon.
All right, we're 40 minutes into this thing. That's incredible.
Oh, good grief,
man. It's incredible. We got to make our picks, take a break. We want to talk IndyCar, their season end. We've got a Morse code report, so we're going to have to fly through this stuff. I got to be honest, I'm on such a victory high for Sebastian Vettel. I haven't even looked back at last year's Sochi race. I can remember it in my mind a little bit, so we got to make some picks So we'll just kind of breeze through these pretty quick. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stay on the Lewis Hamilton bandwagon here. Since I've gotten on it, he has not done very well. So I'm going to stay on it and say Hamilton wins, but we'll find out what Ferrari brings here. There are some stretches here where you can get in that horsepower and use it a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it has the twisty bits as well. I'm going to go with Hamilton as my winner. My bogey, man, this one's tricky here. I'll go Norris as my bogey, who could also be my midfield MVP. But midfield MVP, I'm going to look at Giovinazzi again. I'm going to see if the Italian, maybe Alfa's got a little something for him. That's when I'm going to go with my picks. I turn it over to you, Eric Morse.
Bottas will be back on form in Russia. It's the site of his first victory. And Tony, I think I've overthought this. I'm not sure that Bottas wins pole position, but at Sochi, this is one of the longest runs down to turn one of the entire season. If you can catch a slipstream from somebody on that first lap, being second or third might be the place to be. And if you want somebody who pretty consistently would be second or third on the grid, I'm thinking Bottas might be your man. He gets around this track really well. He hasn't won since, Baku?
Yeah.
It's been a while. So
they owe him one.
I think karma comes around. Valtteri Bottas is your Russian Grand Prix victor. I don't even feel like making a bogey. I'm just going to go straight to mid.
Really.
Yeah, I think the bogey is there for if you got a feeling, but you're too chicken shit to make it your race winner.
The bogey's obviously one of the Ferraris, and it would have to be Sebastian Vettel. I don't think Leclerc can even be considered a bogey because he's probably going to be one of the co-favorites. I would say if Sebastian went 2 for 2, wouldn't that kind of be a bogey?
Ferrari's won 3 in a row,
but
and he's still a 4-time world champion. I don't think he can be considered a bogey if that car's won 3 straight races.
All right, give me your midfield.
I'm looking at the hometown hero, Danny Kvyat. I believe did he finish on the podium there, or was it somewhere else in his Red Bull days?
I don't recall.
I remember he torpedoed Seb pretty hard there. That's where he got his nickname, the torpedo. I think he crashed into him twice in the same lap.
But we both think Silver Arrows get the win.
Yeah. I think
so. We're not being influenced that Ferrari has found something because they were able to win at Singapore. We're not necessarily
Mercedes
sold
had
yet.
a car that could have won Singapore
if they get the strategy. Sure.
Yeah, I think that Mercedes, they didn't give the race away, but they could have won that if they had played their cards differently. I think they're going to come back with a fury. And I think it could be Bottas.
All right. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's take a quick break. We come back. The IndyCar season ended. Eric will give you his review of that. It was pretty exciting. And then we'll do a little Morse code update, and we'll get out of here. Take a break here on American Racing Snobs.
Welcome back to American Racing Snobs. Eric Morse alongside Tony Rizzuti. It was a busy Racing Snob weekend. Talked ad nauseum about the Singapore Grand Prix. The IndyCar finale. Much anticipated return to Laguna Seca. What a fantastic facility.
Beautiful racetrack.
I can't pick a better track than that. Maybe Watkins Glen in terms of North American racetracks that just make the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Laguna Seca, I went there last year for the IMSA race, and it is hallowed ground. It was so great to see open-wheel racing back at Laguna Seca for the first time in 15 years. Alex Rossi coming in as there were 4 title contenders, but Dixon was really a long shot. So if you're looking at the big 3, Newgarden came in with a 41-point advantage over Rossi and 1 point back to Simon Pagenaud, really a 3-horse race. Rossi said coming into the weekend that he was afraid the title would be decided in qualifying. I think he was wrong. There was a lot more passing and a lot more going on in that race than just a processional that a lot of the drivers predicted. High wear on the tires there. Rossi actually qualified in 3rd. Josef Newgarden was 4th. Simon Pagenaud 6th. So they're all within sight of each other. It was Colton Herta, though, stealing the show on pole position for the 3rd time in his rookie season, and he didn't look back, Tony. He controlled that race like a veteran.
That kid's ridiculous.
He's so impressive.
Talented.
And it's been a big week for him. They just announced that he is going to drive a full-time Andretti Autosport. Right now it's a satellite team with Harding Steinbrenner. I believe the Steinbrenners, boo Yankees, go Sox, are still going to be involved with the Andretti effort next year as a financer, but they were worried about that team having the funding to really compete next year, so this really solidifies Colton Herta 5 full-time Andretti Autosport cars
crazy, isn't it?
for next year, but what a drive from him. Simon Pagenaud looked really racy, I thought, trying to do everything he could. He said he had the full support of Team Penske to try to take the fight to his teammate. He was able to race his way through the field to a point. It was actually his teammate Will Power that got the overcut on the second round of pit stops, jumped him from 4th up to 2nd. But Pagenaud was super racy. He was driving around people on the outside of the Andretti hairpin. He knew he basically had to get up there and win. Newgarden drove a very smart race, I thought. He ended up coming home in the 8th position, which was enough to seal the championship for him. But he was leaving lots of room, avoiding drama. Pagenaud passed him on the outside. Rossi followed him through. That could have gotten ugly, but everybody really respected each other.
Yeah.
Rossi said after the race, the right driver won the championship, and I have to agree with him. Despite, a couple races earlier this year where he gave away some points unnecessarily, Josef Newgarden is becoming a very complete driver. He's been in the sport for, 7 years? I think since his rookie season when he joined Sarah Fisher as a Road to Indy scholarship winner. A second championship in 3 seasons for Josef Newgarden, the young driver from Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's obvious that Roger picked the right driver. It's very rare that he gets it wrong, but to come in and try to beat Simon Pagenaud and Will Power in equal equipment is a tall enough order. Plus, you got Rossi, who is just hoisting that Andretti team to new heights. Rossi is driving as well as anybody can drive.
There is so much talent, really, really good talent in IndyCar right now. I mean, the fact that a guy like Graham Rahal, who's very talented, is finishing outside the top 10 in some of these races. I mean, the talent level right now in IndyCar is off the charts.
It's so entertaining to watch, too. By the way, Josef Newgarden, he'll be in action this weekend in our neck of the woods. He is going to test, I don't think it's really a test more than a demonstration laps of his championship-winning car. Will be at the Charlotte Roval on Friday after Cup Series qualifying about 6 p.m. I will definitely be there to see the newly minted champion turning laps on the road course. That'll be the second weirdest place I've ever seen an IndyCar.
Where was the first?
Daytona. I went to that.
When did they do that?
I think it was September of 2006, if I'm going off the top of my head. They brought TK, Danica, and Sam Hornish brought cars to Daytona and did like a 2-day test.
Oh, wow. They
started using the Rolex 24 course, but getting onto the banking coming out of the International Horseshoe was really starting to take a toll on the undertray of those cars. So they ended up using the motorcycle course, which spits you out onto Lake Lloyd after running only half the infield. I don't think they were ever really serious about running a race there.
Bad idea.
But it was really cool. I was standing on pit road watching Sam Hornish Jr. go flying by on the banking at Daytona. It was a sight to behold.
Yeah.
It's still going to be really cool to see Joe New driving that Penske Chevy at the Roval this weekend. I'm sure I'm going to be gushing about that next week once we get back in action here on American Racing Snobs.
Send me some photos so I can put on the old Snobs Twitter page.
Oh, yeah. I'm on it. Let's see. What else is going on in the world of IndyCar before we move into other racing series? Oh, the Rookie of the Year battle came down to the line. You know who won it?
I don't.
It wasn't Colton Herta.
Who got it?
Felix Rosenqvist.
How about he had a great run, finished 5th.
Finished 5th in the race. He had, I think, a pair of runner-up finishes over the course of the year. Very nearly won Mid-Ohio.
I just don't think of him as a rookie sometimes.
Marcus Ericsson is a rookie, too.
Yeah. He did not have a good run.
No, I think he ended up 4th in the rookie fight behind Santino Ferrucci, who actually made what I would say the biggest mistake of his rookie season at Laguna Seca, crashed into Takuma Sato. Not very clever on his part, but I have to tip my hat to Santino Ferrucci. I didn't think he had this type of season in him after watching him race in Europe. There are two type of people when it comes to Santino Ferrucci. Those who watched him in Europe and already formed an opinion of him, kind of like I did, And those who just saw him really have a stellar, impressive, quick, and well-measured season as a rookie in the IndyCar series, so credit to him. This is a rookie class we're going to be talking about for years. I think we're going to see multiple champions come out of this class, specifically Colton Herta and our Rookie of the Year, Felix Rosenqvist. I think that about wraps it up for IndyCar. I did want to touch on a couple news and notes from F1, even though we already spent 40 minutes talking about it. And we mentioned Robert Kubica is out. Romain Grosjean keeps his ride.
How?
I agree with Gunter on this one. We'll get Gunter on, and you can hold his feet to the fire on it.
I'm not that brave. I'm going to tell him that's a great decision.
The Alfa
of course, they couldn't hook me up with passes at Austin, so maybe they must have heard the podcast.
The Alfa Romeo penalty from Germany was upheld. Remember, both cars were excluded.
Somebody got to keep their point.
That makes me so happy. This is all I wanted for Robert Kubica. After testing, I saw that Russell was lightning in a bottle. I saw that this car was going to be a bit of a nightmare. I am a huge Kubica fan. All I wanted from this comeback was points. And we got a point. Was it Annie Potts and Ghostbusters? We got one! Yes! Yes, Kubica gets a point. It also means that Lewis Hamilton, another favorite of mine, keeps his point streak alive, because if you recall, he was promoted from 11th to 9th when both Alphas were DQ'd. That means his point streak is currently, after Singapore, at 27 races.
Unreal.
Do you know who the all-time record holder is?
I'm going to say Schumacher, and I'm going to be wrong.
You're wrong. It's Lewis Hamilton. 33 straight races from Japan 2016, all of 2017, and it ended in 2018 at Paul Ricard was the last race he scored points in before the double retirement at Austria last year for Mercedes. So Hamilton has a chance to break his own record. I think Schumacher had a run in the 20s in the early 2000s, but that list is dominated mostly by recent drivers because we don't see a lot of mechanicals like we used to back in the day. Also, if you're a West Coast racing snob, the Hollywood Festival in L.A. on October 30th, there's going to be some F1 drivers and F1 cars there. Max Verstappen, Danny Ricardo, and Valtteri Bottas will be there ahead of their appearance at the Circuit of the Americas for the United States Grand Prix. So the Hollywood Festival in L.A., again, that's October 30th. Make sure you check that out if you are able. Some other things going on. Driver shuffling in the junior formula for reasons that we wish they didn't have to. Artem Markelov has been deputized. He will be driving the final 4 races of the Formula 2 season for Arden. Obviously, terrible circumstances after losing Antoine Hubert, but I can't think of a better person than Artem Markelov. He'll step out of his Super GT Formula ride that he's been driving all season to return to the series that he was so exciting to watch in the last couple seasons. Only Sochi and Abu Dhabi remain for that championship, by the way. In Formula 3, remember Alex Peroni?
Yes.
The guy who got YouTube famous for taking flight at Monza. He is going to sit out this weekend. David Schumacher will be taking his place. I see you cocked an eyebrow at that. He is the 17-year-old son of Ralf Schumacher, a multi-time Grand Prix winner. The nephew of Michael Schumacher, making his series debut in Formula 3 this weekend in Sochi. Also, Indy Lights, they wrapped up their season, and your favorite, Rinus VeeKay, the Dutchman, swept the race weekend, 6 wins on the season, but it wasn't enough to keep Ollie Askew from clinching the championship and all the perks that come with it in the Road to Indy Scholarship. You know what he gets? $1.1 million to guarantee entry to a minimum of 3 IndyCar races next season, including the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500. And as you'll recall, Ollie Askew was a winner this year at IMS in the Freedom 100.
That's pretty strong because that much money wouldn't even get you an Xfinity ride here in the NASCAR world.
I love how they prop up their young drivers.
Yeah.
They take them all the way through the Mazda series and into junior single-seaters all the way up to Indy Lights. They really do push to keep new blood coming into the series. And you look at some of the graduates of Indy Lights and where they are now, it's obviously working, even though they don't have the best car count. it's still impressive that IndyCar and Mazda support.
It works for them.
Yeah.
Right? It just works.
And I still think that Rinus VeeKay, we haven't heard the last of him. That's his 15th win in Indy Lights over the last 3 seasons.
By the way, using that name to try to get a dinner reservation or a table when there's a wait doesn't work. I've tried it. That was going to be my bar name.
I think you need
Maybe
to work
I could
on your
sneak
Dutch
in there or
accent.
something. That didn't work for me.
Is it just me or are the Dutchies taken over?
They're freaky deaky. That's all I know.
You got Max Verstappen in Formula
wave.
1. You got Nick De Vries, Stoffel's Belgian, but Rinus VeeKay on the way up. There's a lot of Dutch talent coming through in all the series.
Who knew?
Jos Verstappen. Josh the Bosch probably knew.
Nice.
That pretty much wraps up what was going on this past weekend. Looking forward, obviously we have Sochi. Formula 2 is back in action. Can't wait to watch that series hit the pavement.
That's been fun to watch.
I love Formula 2. And if you have a cable account that has ESPN, you can go to ESPN.com. You click on Watch. I don't know if they're even broadcast live. I cut cable a few years ago. But what we do is we'll go to Watch tab on ESPN after the race is over, and you just hit schedule and replays, filter by the date that the race happened on, and look for race 1 on Saturday, race 2, the sprint on Sundays. They fit in like an hour time slot. It's great fun to have to supplement your race weekend when F1's in action.
All right, great stuff there, Eric. We have gone super long today, but I hope you've enjoyed it. We've included a lot of the driver audio. I think that helps.
I hadn't heard any of that stuff, by the way. Thank you for digging that up.
Yeah, it helps explain the race, I think, a little bit better to those of us. And to our good friend David Hobbs and Steve Matchett, who you know very well from back in the Fox days when they had the coverage.
And the NBC days.
I, too, had to watch the race via DVR and did not see the final 7 laps of the race. Had to watch the highlights.
YouTube TV had my back. The whole thing was there.
I need to be I know to extend it by at least an hour. I know to do that. I didn't do it on the last time, so I was nervous until I could find out that my Ferrari guys won. So I feel for you, David. You're not the only one who didn't do their DVR correctly. 3 safety cars will do that. In fact, I was surprised we ended up getting the full laps in. I thought the time might come into play, which would have been interesting as well. But we had a whole lot of fun today. Don't forget, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Leave us a comment. We love to hear your comments, right, wrong, or indifferent. We love to talk to our fellow snobs. And as always, for Eric Morse, I'm Tony Rizzuti. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you after the Russian Grand Prix. Maybe it'll be Ferrari again, or the Silver Arrows, or will Max have something to say? We'll find out next week on American Racing Snobs.